Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 8th episode of the Hyper IgM Podcast. Today, we're joined by Rebekah, mother of 2 boys who were diagnosed with Hyper IgM and underwent stem cell transplants. She offers her unique perspective as a parent on the disease and transplant. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 8th episode of the Hyper IgM Podcast. In today's episode, I am joined by Rebekah. How are you today, Rebekah?
I'm doing great, Ezra. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. So, as always, before we start getting into the nitty-gritty, for our viewers that don't already know what Hyper IgM syndrome is, Hyper IgM syndrome is a 1 in a million rare disease that causes a person's immune system to not function properly. People with Hyper IgM are unable to make antibodies, which means if they get sick, they will most likely have a hard time fighting off the infection and could get very ill. Hyper IgM patients are also at a high risk of developing cancer. Without a stem cell transplant, life expectancy for a person with Hyper IgM is an average of 30 years old. However, some do live into their 40s or 50s. So, with that being said, Rebekah, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what you do for work, and anything else you think the viewers should know about you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that introduction. So I'm currently in Northern California in the Bay Area. I'm married. We have 3 kids, Benjamin, Gabriel, and Isabella. They're 6, 3, and 1. And I am an OBGYN, so a doctor for women's health. And I also happen to be in the military, which is why I'm in this area of California.
Wow, I did not know you were in the military. Are you a medical
I'm in the Air Force.
personnel? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
I do women's health in the Air Force. So it's a unique situation, but a lot of fun.
Wow, that is a very, very cool profession. So, your 2 oldest children had Hyper IgM and were transplanted, correct?
Yes.
All right.
That is correct.
So, let's walk through your story chronologically. First of all, 2 children with Hyper IgM, and it's a 1 in a million rare disease. So, that's a pretty unique situation. So, can you take us back to when everything started with your first child? What were the first signs that something wasn't quite right?
Yes. Well, it was interesting because Benjamin was born in 2019 and was very healthy at birth. And that was something that was difficult for the diagnosis because for about 5.5 months, he was a super healthy baby, meeting all his metrics and milestones. And then we went on a Christmas trip to Tahoe, and he had a severe respiratory illness. He turned blue. We ended up in the ER. And initially we thought it was RSV or, just really severe influenza. When they put the O2 sat on him, he was like in the 40s, and they did not believe it. It took 2 liters in a 5.5-month-old to get him back up into the 90s. So it was a confusing initial situation. And ultimately, he ended up being transferred to a PICU. And after 3 months of that, of the threat of intubation, of going through many, many different tests and everything kind of being negative and having no clue, one of the neonatologists ordered a complement panel to check his ability to make antibodies, his immune system. And when that was drastically low, that pointed them in the direction of an immune condition. And they got an immunologist involved, and she ultimately was able to recommend testing for Hyper IgM after they did a bronchoscopy. So because of his severe respiratory illness with really no etiology, they did a bronch and it grew out pneumocystis. And so that is in severe immunocompromised patients like HIV or something of that nature. So that pointed them in the direction of just a panel of testing where we happened to find the Hyper IgM.
Okay. So you said he had a severe respiratory, and that was the first sign. Okay, yeah. So for me, I came down with a very bad case of pneumonia when I was an infant, and I just could not clear it. And then eventually I was admitted to my local hospital, and they eventually checked my immune system, and that's when we found out it was Hyper IgM. So did you know anything about Hyper IgM when your first son was diagnosed?
No. So we had no idea about the diagnosis. We'd never heard the terminology. I will say the one odd thing in our history is I have an uncle who was very, very sick when he was a kid through adulthood, never got a diagnosis, and he was the only one in the family. And so that was always in the back of our minds that he had some sort of immune condition, that he was born in the 60s. So they never gave a name to it. And he
Mm.
unfortunately passed away in his early 30s. And so we always knew it was something. But it wasn't until our son Benjamin was diagnosed that we understood that's what that was.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that just
Yeah.
goes to show how recently this
Hmm.
disease has been given any attention at all. I think it was the
Right.
1990s, if I'm not mistaken, when it was first named.
Yes. Mm.
So you had family history of it, you just weren't aware because there wasn't
Right.
any testing then. Wow.
Exactly.
Hmm. So after you got this diagnosis, was transplant immediately the way forward, or was that decision more complicated?
It was a little complicated. And the initial was getting the diagnosis, having something to kind of wrap our heads around, because really for us the issue was he was not sick on and off. He went from being a healthy baby to being a very, very sick, they told us he may die baby. So once we
Mm.
got a diagnosis and we saw that there was a management plan of some sort, that was the first step. So IVIG was offered to us. They said he could live on this. This is something that will help him. So with that, we were kind of on that path. They did mention transplant, but I would say we were in such a situation of shock and being overwhelmed and recovering from his situation being so severe that it took a couple months for us to get a referral to one of the transplant centers here at UCSF in San Francisco, where we were given that option and discussed it in a little more detail.
So was there a specific thing that a doctor said or something that happened that made you make that final decision to move forward with transplant?
Yes. I mean, ultimately, it was the fact that they said this is a cure. You know, there's
Mm.
the possibility of living a life that is good on IVIG. That is an option. They told us that that's really, really good. They've continued to improve the quality of it, and so that's definitely an option. But when we thought about him having to live still with this condition, having to alter his life very significantly in certain exposures versus going through a really difficult medical procedure, but at least having the option of a cure, that's why we decided on that route.
That's really the same logic that my parents used when I was transplanted. They weighed the options. IVIG is an option, but if there was a chance that there could be a cure, you would have never known whether it worked if you didn't take that leap, if you didn't make that
Absolutely.
decision. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ben's admitted to the hospital. Did he have any trouble finding a donor? Because I had a lot of trouble finding a donor.
Hmm. Yeah, we have obviously are in contact with a lot of families now who are in the same situation where they don't have the option to transplant. And so that's the other part of it is we decided on transplant knowing that, you know, there's that's a hope still too. And but we were very, very fortunate in that Ben matched very well. I want to say he had 8 to 10 donors that they considered a really, really good match, like 12 out of 12. They had multiple 12 out of 12 matches for him. So yes, we were
Wow.
fortunate.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's truly very lucky and great that he
Hmm.
had such a good selection. I
Hmm.
had to wait a long time for my donor, and as I've talked about previously on the podcast, I had two stem cell transplants.
Hmm.
With the first one was unsuccessful. I used a cord blood unit for that one, and it didn't take. The second one, there was no donor in the registry. Finally, a donor popped up, and it was an 8 out of 10 match, which is the
Hmm.
lowest that they'll go for. And it's
Wow.
risky, but they were willing to do it.
Hmm.
And that's what saved my life. But finding a donor can still be very hard for
Hmm.
some patients, which is why having a diverse and big registry is so important.
Yes.
So, in the hospital, what did a typical day look like from a parent's perspective?
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's interesting. The first one was a little bit tougher than the second, I will say. So both of our
Mm.
sons went through transplant. The first one was in 2020 in the middle of COVID. So it was just a very weird time. We had our masks on the entire time. Chris and I, my husband, could not both be in the room with our son at the same time. So that was a
Mm.
really challenge, was having to switch out and not having that kind of support. But for the process was similar in that it's kind of the monotony of every single day is waking up, trying to get your child to eat a little bit, trying to find things that keep them interactive. So
Mm.
we would set up a little playpen. Both our kids were 1 year old when they were transplanted, so they were just starting to walk, but they would bring in a lot of toys. There was a great part of the hospital called Child Life, where they would actually come in and they would interact. They would play music or they would play bingo, and
Mm.
that was like a lifesaver, because it's just the monotony of the day that is difficult to get through, when every day is the same and your child is not feeling well and not really eating, and but the meals are something to kind of break up the day.
Mm.
And then usually we would get a lab draw in the morning, get those labs back throughout the day, depending on what things looked like, if they needed a transfusion or of blood or platelets. And it was just kind of very, very long days, very tiring days, even though all you're doing
Mm.
is just being in the hospital.
I can't imagine what going through transplant was like during COVID.
Hmm.
Not only is your world feel uncertain and challenging and scary, but the whole world
Yeah.
is up in flames around you, something that we've haven't seen in so long, like a worldwide pandemic. And as having an immune deficiency during a pandemic is not a good combo. So I
Hmm.
can't imagine what the stress was like from having COVID around you during that time.
Hmm.
And you said you had to switch out of the room with your husband. Would you say that that was one of the biggest challenges of hospital life, or was there something else that really sticks out to you as the biggest challenge?
For the first transplant, I would say that would be the hardest part, because you really you rely on the nurses, your family, everybody for support. It's a tough time, and so not having even each other, they would sometimes the nurses would give us like 10 minutes with each other, and that was huge,
Mm.
just to have that support. And I will say it was hard having a toddler. That's the other
Mm.
thing that was kind of rough every time, is they were just learning to walk, and they have you have a central line with all
Mm.
of these cords, like 6 or 7 cords connected to a pole that gives you maybe 3 or 4 feet. And
Yeah.
so the other part that's always tough is we would be chasing them around, and 2 or 3 times a day a nurse would come in and unravel all the cords. So yeah, that was hard.
Yeah, yeah. When I had my central lining in the hospital and I was hooked up to the IV. I mean, there's a video of me like dancing in the hospital room with like the all the cords and stuff.
Yeah,
And
the pole, somebody following you with the pole
yup,
right behind you.
yup, yup. And I know before you mentioned that child life was a lifesaver. Um, and I can tell you from a patient perspective, child life was literally life. Like I
Mhm.
most of the things I remember from the hospital is the fun stuff that child life did with me. And I don't know from a parent's perspective if like that made you happy as well, seeing them cheer up your child in that tough time. It probably did, right?
Yes, yes, because you're thinking, we would talk about how they could not leave this room. I mean, you're already in a tough spot, and then you're in within these like 4 walls day in
Mm.
and day out for months on end. So any bit of, yeah, change to the schedule,
Yeah.
coming in and playing a song would be, yeah, just make the day so much better. And bubbles, they'd always bring bubbles, and that's the age where
Mm.
they love bubbles. So yes, we were
Yeah.
so thankful for them.
Yeah, for sure. So, did Ben face any complications during or after transplant?
Yeah, so Ben was really, really sick before we started the transplant because of how severe his pneumocystis was. He was actually on oxygen for 3 or 4 months after we went home. They
Mm.
told us he may not come off oxygen. He did completely, but they were just worried about the amount of damage to his lungs, and so he went into transplant kind of sick. So he had a little bit of a hard course. He did develop veno-occlusive disease and had to go to the ICU. And so it's a liver complication from some of the
Mm.
chemotherapeutic medications. He also had a severe reaction to another chemo drug where he broke out in hives and they had to transfer him to the ICU. But both of those were managed. He came out of it. He did have a pretty severe reaction to the suppression meds where he was neutropenic for a little bit longer. And so that's the scariest time where you can't fight off anything. You're not making any kind of blood products. Your bone marrow is completely depleted. And so
Mm.
he had to get platelet transfusions pretty aggressively for like maybe 5 days in a row. It was very, very scary. So those were kind of the worst in hospital things. Outside of the hospital, he struggled with eating. He was 2 years old and not even 20 pounds. So he really, really struggled with weight for a long, long time, like 2 years post transplant. So that was something that was really hard for us to get over.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, the last thing that you should be worrying about after you leave transplant is something so seemingly novel as eating.
Right. Mm.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that was hard. And when I was discharged after my second transplant, I had a pretty severe complication where I developed auto antibodies, and it started attacking my cells.
Yeah.
My parents and I like to say my cells went crazy. That's how we'd always talk about it. And I had to be on high dose steroids and immunosuppressants afterwards. So literally delaying the onset of my immune system, which is the whole reason we just went through
Yeah.
transplant. And now
Right.
I'm taking immunosuppressants, and that wasn't a fun time. Luckily, it did resolve, but that was definitely not what you want to hear after leaving the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after talking about all this bad stuff, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term,
Yeah.
were there any moments of joy or normalcy that helped get your family through everything?
Yeah, I mean, coming home was huge. Leaving the hospital was such a big milestone, and we saw an improvement in Ben just getting into the routine of normal life. So
Mm.
that was a really special time, just being home. Like he wasn't eating. He was still at his central line in. We had to deal with that, but just being in our own space was huge. And then we did actually have a bone marrow drive for him shortly after we got home, and that was really, really nice. We had a lot of new donors come on board just telling his story. So that was also like a really like positive
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, I love that you used his story to recruit more donors to the registry. A big thing for me is being able to give back to this community
Mhm.
now that I'm on the other end of it. And you seem like you hit the ground running. Like you left those hospital doors and then boom, had a drive. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. We
Really
were just
good for
so
you.
thankful, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great way to show your thanks is by paying it forward and having a drive. And after all that, you come home, you're finally back in your own space. I cannot imagine what it felt like to receive the news that your second son also had hyper IgM and needed a transplant. What was that like emotionally to receive one diagnosis and then another one so soon afterward?
Yeah, that was really, really tough. And it was also something we were terrified about when we found out about the disease, knowing that it was familial and that was possible. I think you grieve a little bit. You grieve thinking again, we don't, this isn't a normal childhood experience for this child as well. And you feel so bad about that. There's a lot of guilt that comes along with that, saying, how could we do this to another one of our children? But then there was also a different kind of hope with it because with Ben, we had zero hope. We did not understand anything. We didn't know what was going on. And Gabe was never sick. So our second son was never, ever sick because we got the diagnosis early. We knew before he ever showed signs of it to test him. And so we took a much different path. So he is actually always, apart from the difficulties of actually transplanting, he's always been very healthy.
Okay. So that's first great that he was healthy and had a smoother time going into transplant.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly was that timeline from when Ben finished his transplant to when Gabe was diagnosed?
He was actually diagnosed prenatally. So we diagnosed before I even delivered with him,
Okay.
because we knew when we found out he was a boy, we knew that that was a possibility. So I did something called an amniocentesis, where they actually put a little needle in the belly and get some fluid out from around the baby and test it. So we had a meeting with Ben's transplant team. They got us, in for Gabe, and we started him on IVIG at 3 months old. And so that's why he was like, never had an issue.
Okay. So he starts his transplant. Was there anything different besides, you said he wasn't as sick going into it?
Right.
Was there any other difference between the two transplants, or whether that's physically going, like a medical difference going through, or just what was going on in your head? I know you briefly
Mhm.
just touched on you had more hope going through the second one
Yeah.
because you kind of been here before. Was there any other difference you'd like to talk about with the transplants?
I think it was not being in during COVID. It was much easier.
Mm.
I think honestly it was easier just because we knew what to expect. And it was not, as difficult a time medically. We could be there together as a family. And he did have the same complication of, occlusive disease, but he overall, like I said, the transplant process, as difficult as it still is, I think we all handled it better. It wasn't every day thinking, oh my gosh, is he going to die? Is something going to happen? We had a little bit more of what to expect and when to worry and when not to worry. Like, this is kind of what happens.
That perfectly leads me into what I'd like to ask next. You were talking about how you were managing your emotions better the second time
Mhm.
versus the first time. But in general, how did you balance being strong for your children while also processing everything yourself for the parents out there?
Yeah, I will say it's very, very hard, but children are so resilient. And I could just only imagine for your parents having to watch you go through a transplant twice, because it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal, but kids don't know that, to be honest. Every single day they wake up just like it's a new day, unaware that they're even suffering. And so that makes it easier on you as a parent. You kind of can tuck that away and deal with that on your own, not bringing that negativity to your child, is what we tried to do. I don't know. I don't think we did it quite as well with Ben because we were all still a little bit traumatized. But with Gabe, it's just being there for your child, being a positive influence. You see child life and they come in, they're so happy. It doesn't matter what's going on in the room. They're happy, they're positive. And so you kind of feed into that and say, I need to just be here for my kid, and make sure that they're as cared for as they can be in this tough situation.
Parents are really the superheroes here because y- just being able to say I'm being positive right now in that hospital room has got to take so much mental power, and I really admire parents that are able to do that for their kids and able to say this is terrible. I'm obviously really freaked out right now, but I need to be here for my kid. That
Mhm.
is so strong and so admirable. And I'm sure your kids couldn't be more thankful for having a mom like you that was able to do that.
No, I appreciate that.
Of course. So, where was Ben at health wise during your son's second transplant? Because he's still recovering, right?
Right. Yeah. So he actually recovered much slower than Gabriel. He had to be on immunosuppressants a little bit longer. He was on IVIG for, I want to say, almost a full year and a half out as well. So he was still in a spot where he hadn't received his vaccinations. We were still working through his eating habits, but he was certainly better than acute transplant. So he was staying with family, and we did bring him in to see Gabe in the hospital, I want to say twice, when we were approved and everybody was cleared. But yeah, he was still kind of on his own journey as well, but in the improving part, in the recovery part, which was good.
Did your children ever ask what hyper IgM was or why they were sick, why they were having to go through this? And if they did, how did you explain that very hard to understand topic to them?
Yeah, they really didn't ask too much at the time because they didn't understand. I mean, they were so young. They have asked since, and so we've
Right.
had to explain since why they went through that. They always refer to like when they were really, really sick. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that we've had to kind of talk about. And I think they'll have more questions on. A lot of it now is the things that we have to do, like precaution wise, like we've been told they're not supposed to be around smoke. We have to always wear sunscreen because of the chemotherapy. So those kind of
Yeah.
things, they're always like, oh, because I was sick, right? And I was like, yeah. And so we kind of talk about it
Hmm.
in that aspect. But it's certainly something we do try to talk about because it's also in the family. So it's something that they need to be aware of and know about, and not just let another generation skip or anything without us, continuing to address this.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've become much more aware of my sickness as I age, like
Hmm.
what I've been through, and also with just chemo side effects, like later in life, you're like,
Yes.
why am I feeling this? Oh, maybe it has something to do with that. So you can kind of will creep back up into your mind.
Mhm.
So I bet your kids will probably ask more questions about it later on for sure.
Yes.
So you're discharged after your second transplant. What did that feel like? Was that different than the first time? Was that a even bigger sigh of relief?
Yes, that was like, I hope we never have to go back here again, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like we just wanted to be completely done. I mean, and
Mm,
and the hospital was amazing. We had amazing care, but yeah, we were ready to just close the chapter on that, hopefully.
yeah. So you just said your hospital was amazing, but is there anything you wish doctors, nurses, or hospitals better understood about what parents experience, even though you just did say you had a positive
Mhm.
experience?
We hoped that they knew the impact that they had. Just day to day, we saw like amazing care, and we literally felt like our child's lives were in their hands. And I don't even think we could voice our appreciation enough for them, especially because in pediatrics, it takes a very special person to be able to not just do the medical side of it, but know how to interact with a child as well.
Yeah, for sure. I obviously can't speak for my parents for what they wish were better understood about what parents experience, but it's interesting to hear that your feedback is that you don't think you can thank them enough. And I think that's definitely a testament to the heroism of that profession and what they do
Yes.
every day to help these kids.
Hmm.
So, has your experience with your two sons going through transplant and hyper IgM changed the way you see life?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, in one way, you just don't take as much for granted at all. I
Mm,
mean, I still daily think about Ben and when he was initially sick, thinking I just wish I could fast forward to seeing him like play soccer. When he's like 6 years old playing soccer, playing with his friends, and you just have those moments. And in transplant, the same thing when he was very, very neutropenic, and you're thinking, did we make a huge mistake?
mm,
Because there's many times, I'll say for parents who are thinking about going through transplant, you will have moments of regret where your child is suffering in front of you and you think, why did I do this to my kid? IVIG sounded good. But ultimately, again, for the cure, you put them through it, and so I have a whole new appreciation of just day-to-day life with my kids. And science and healthcare is amazing.
yeah. Yep. I was actually just talking about this with my mom today, actually, how
Hmm.
we have so much to thank
Yes.
for science. Like,
Yes.
really. It's an incredible thing, especially because as we were just talking about, hyper IgM is a more recently
Yeah.
discovered thing, and how fast science was able to evolve to be
Mhm.
able to cure me and your two sons. So, something I always try to bring to the forefront with this podcast is hope. Hope for cure, hope for new developments on this disease, just hope in general. What moments gave you hope when things were feeling uncertain?
So one of the big things is I would think about my uncle and how they had no treatment for him, and how thankful I was that today, well, even from 2019 to 2026 now, what amazing advancements there have been in medicine. Even the transplant for Ben and Gabe were different. It was a little bit more tailored. They try to take away some of the side effects a little bit more. So what I would say to parents is that there is absolutely amazing healthcare out there. And we're just fortunate to be in the time when we have these options.
Yeah, again, healthcare and options and how lucky we are to be in this time where those are available. Couldn't be more thankful myself as well. And last but certainly not least, what advice would you give to a parent whose child has just been diagnosed with hyper IgM? And this is a heavy question,
Yes.
but what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, there's an amazing support system. There's a Facebook group. There is now a foundation. And there's so many families that we talk to that we reached out to. So you're not in a silo. I would say reach out, get more information, look for mentorship through other families. And then again, there's so many good treatments. There's a cure. You don't have to take it all in at once. Take it day by day, but there is hope and there's options.
I'm sure there are families out there that are very, very thankful for that advice, and also so lucky now to have a community so they know they're not alone, which can be very scary when
Absolutely.
you're diagnosed with such a rare disease. So, to wrap up this episode, I would like to know how your children are doing now. And maybe there's a special guest that wants to come on to the podcast.
Yes. I have my son, Benji. He is now 6, almost 7, and just about to celebrate his 7th birthday and doing very well. Do you want to say hi? Hi. Hi. He's a little bit shy of the camera, but as you can see, he's healthy, happy. He's a hockey player now. He does ice hockey.
Nice.
Oh, we might get lucky with
two
Gabriel
special
as well.
guests.
Hey, do you want to say hi? He just woke up from nap, but he is also quite healthy and doing well.
2 real-life superheroes on the Hyper IgM podcast right here.
Yeah, can you guys say hi to Ezra?
Say hi.
Hi.
He's still waking up.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you. Thanks for giving us this opportunity again to talk about hyper IgM, and I really appreciate all that you're doing for the foundation and for this diagnosis.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I enjoy doing this so much, and especially when I see 2 kids like this that have been through it and are on the other end. It's really inspiring, that to keep doing what we're doing. So thanks to people like you and yeah. So thank you everyone so much for watching. That brings our episode to a close. Thank you so much again, Rebekah, and now Gabe and Benji for coming on the podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes just like this on the Hyper IgM YouTube channel or Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you again so much for viewing or listening, and we will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe to our podcast, rate or like this episode, and share. It means a lot. Stay tuned for more.